Welcome to the Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture Series. At the end of each slide, there will be a 5-second delay. Use this time to complete your notes. When you are done, push play and move on to the next slide. This presentation will begin in 5 seconds. Welcome to Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture 3.2 on similarities and differences of political parties, and let's talk about the original Captain America, George Washington. You know, the commander of the Continental Army and numero uno, the first president of the United States of America. How important is this guy? Well, we named our nation's capital after him, and then 100 years later, we named an entire state after him. I mean, we named this giant bridge after him. It crosses the Hudson River. And then we named this bridge, which is 1 mile away from that other bridge, after him. George Washington is a very important person in American history, and here's what he thought about political parties. However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines of which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to warp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Let's just say Washington was not a fan of political parties. The question is, was he right or wrong? Well, today we'll look at the answers to those two questions, and with that said, let's go to the next slide. In order to see if Washington was right or wrong, we're going to have to really see how these political parties work. So let's start and ask ourselves, how are political parties similar? The primary reason to have a political party is to win elections. Your vote counts. But remember, when it comes to how these parties actually work, your vote counts, but not like you might think. Each party uses a different nominating process on a national, state, and local level, and parties are traditionally controlled by both elected leaders from the party and party officials who control the rules of the party and the nominating process. We call those people the party bosses. All political parties may run themselves differently, but all political parties will have party bosses. Next, the parties try to influence public policy on behalf of their candidates. The candidates are going to believe in a particular public policy, and the political parties are going to try to influence how people think of that public policy as well. Third, each party reflects either liberal or conservative views of the nation. Let's face it, there's only so many voters in the United States of America, and these parties are going to try to figure out who in this country will support their position. It looks just like this. Republicans represent the right, we call those conservatives, and Democrats represent the left, we call those progressives or liberals. Third parties usually reflect views that are further from the center of the political spectrum than the two traditional political parties. What does that mean and what does it look like? This is the political spectrum. In the middle, we have moderates. To the right, we have conservatism, that's our Republicans. To the left, we have liberalism, that's our Democrats. And then our two other parties are farther from the center. We have libertarianism, that's our Libertarian Party. And we have socialism, that's our Green Party. Then we got right in the middle those moderates, and we call moderates the political center. And as you're about to learn, the political center is very important in American politics. Go to the next slide. So who makes up the political center? And how do these moderates make both political parties similar? Political parties attempt to define themselves in a way that wins majority support, that wins the most support by appealing to the political center, appealing to those moderates who are mostly independent voters. But it's not as many voters as you think. Less than 5% of the electorate identified themselves as moderate voters in 2012. In other words, we have these giant national elections, and we are fighting over less than 5% of the total voters in this country. And that leads to some weird results when it comes to national versus state elections. In national politics, the ability of the parties to appeal to the center is challenged by the extreme wings of each party, thus focusing a polarized electorate on ideological issues and not on the day-to-day issues of running the government. What does that mean? It means that people care about the issues more than running the government. They believe that the issue on one side is so important that whether or not the government runs does not become important. And because of this, we get something called gridlock. The government slows down and the government stops on a national level. In state and local politics, the parties are defined in ways that focus on local issues and the day-to-day running of the government, thus depolarizing the electorate and allowing the parties to appeal to the majority of voters. So in Virginia, it's all about day-to-day operations. The Republican and Democratic parties are trying to convince the center of the electorate that they can run the day-to-day operations of the government better than the other party. They're going to be better at educating children. They're going to be better at law enforcement. They're going to be better at running highways. That's depolarizing. Everybody wants those things to be run well. So we have gridlock on a national level, but we have a smooth day-to-day operation on a state level. Go to the next slide. Now that you know the similarities of these parties, let's look at the differences. The differences between the parties is stated in party platforms and reflected in campaigning and proposed legislation. In other words, there's the Democratic way and the Republican Ave, and they are very different. The Republican Party, that's the party of Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan, focuses on limiting government to attain the stated goals in the Constitution, preserving traditional or conservative social norms in society, and practicing fiscal responsibility with limited taxing and spending. The Democratic Party, that's the party of Franklin Roosevelt and Barack Obama, focuses on using the government to empower and assist the citizenry, recognizing progressive norms in society, and creating an environment of fairness within society as a whole. If it was only that simple, these parties might actually be able to find some common ground. But the traditional focus of each party is challenged at times by the rise of factions within each party. These are folks within the party that are pushing the party either to the left or to the right away from the opposing party. For example, Tea Party members are a part of the Republican Party with ultra-conservative views about the power of government. And on the other hand, liberals are a part of the Democratic Party with ultra-liberal views about that same power. In other words, I'm entitled to speak my opinion, and you're perfectly within your rights to be wrong. The factions within these parties keep the parties apart, and that causes things like gridlock on a national level. Go to the next slide. Now that you've learned the similarities and differences of the major political parties, it's time to go back and focus on Washington's initial problem. Why should I have one party or the other? Why can't I have multiple parties with multiple views? Here's the situation. The structure of American government and politics favors a two-party system. And here's why. Third parties are often marginalized in politics. Your idea is important, but it's not important enough to be talked about at a national level. Or even better, the major parties sometimes incorporate the ideas of a third party, which makes the need for the third party unnecessary. Or your idea is extremely important, so important that we're going to take your idea and make it part of our party platform. You are no longer necessary. These are the two reasons why third parties don't rise to the level of the major parties. Here's the thing. Third party matters. But how? Here's how. Third parties introduce new ideas or focus on a particular issue. For example, our libertarians focus on very limited government, and our Green Party focuses on a lot more government, well beyond what the traditional two parties believe in. And sometimes, if they get enough pressure from these third parties, the major political parties will drift towards the third parties and away from the moderates in the center. Also, third parties often revolve around a political personality, like Theodore. Not that Theodore. I'm talking this Theodore, Teddy Roosevelt, who was a Republican president. But when he ran for president again, his party did not like it. So he started the Bull Moose Party, and he ran for president as a third party member. Even Teddy Roosevelt, one of the strongest politicians in American history, learned the hard way that no person has won the presidency unless they've been part of either one or the other major political party. Finally, the third party concept is being challenged by the rise of multiple factions with single issue views or ideas within traditional parties. In other words, there are third parties lurking within the major political parties. So if you think you're only choosing one thing or another, you might have more choice than you originally thought. That's it for this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in class.